Today on Locked On Red Wings, how big of a role will Edvinsson play in his first NHL season? We continue player previews with Simon Edvinsson, JT Compher, and Cam Talbot.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's also the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're getting close to the end of player previews, Scotty. We just have one more week left of them, and on today's list, today's calendar, we have Simon Edvinsson as our headliner, as he is going to be set to play his first full NHL season this upcoming year. And then in segments 2 and 3, we'll be talking about second line center JT Compher and newcomer in net Cam Talbot, and whether or not he can kind of be our solution even on a short-term basis for our goaltending woes. We're going to obviously start with Simon Edvinsson, as already addressed. He is our headliner for today's episode. Scotty, 6'6" Swedish defenseman. We have all been very excited for his arrival on the scene. He played 16 games last year, including a long stint at the end of the season. He looked really good last year at the end of the season and looked ready to make the leap full time. With that being said, when it comes to his role with the Detroit Red Wings this next season, where do we expect him to play both at even strength and on special teams?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, right? Like, we fully expect him to be a fixture in the second pair there. I think really one of the questions that a lot of people have had and will continue to have is, if he does really well, is there a world in which he is on the top pair with Seider? And I think, I don't know. I think that as it stands right now, and we've highlighted this throughout these player previews, I don't think you have the defensive depth to do that. Even if Edvinsson is amazing, I think you have to spread out the wealth a little bit, and you can't just have one super pair and then two of your three pairs be lackluster. I mean, that second pair would what? I'd probably end up being Petrie and Sherrod again. Like, I think that they would probably want to spread out, like I said, kind of spread the wealth a little bit. So I expect him to be on the second pair pretty much all season, which is exciting. And I think that he's going to get some opportunities. You mentioned special teams there. I'm not sure he has a place on the power play, but I do think that there is opportunities for him to be on the blue line in the penalty kill at some point this season. I'm really excited. I think a lot of people obviously are, but it's because we have seen gradual growth in small sample sizes throughout the last two seasons, and now we're getting the full, main course, if you will. Like, this is truly his first full season, as you already said. And I think that I'm excited. I mean, this is again, a guy who has offensive upside, but is really good defensively. There's no telling how high the ceiling could end up being for him, being the number one prospect in the Wings system. Pretty much since Seider and Raymond were no longer prospects. I mean, he was drafted then anyway, but like that's pretty much it. Like, he's been at the top of the list for a while. So yeah, I think that a lot of people are rightfully really excited. I think there's a lot of opportunity. But in the same breath, like, I don't know if I expect him to play, like 26 a night consistently by the end of the season, even if he does crush it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a defenseman who, if he's not a top four defenseman in his first season, will kind of be a disappointment, right? Like, he's a highly touted player who was drafted, 6th overall in his draft year. If I'm yeah, 6th overall in 2021, and he played a lot last year down the stretch when Jake Wallman, was hurt initially and then scratched in that last week and a half, 2 weeks of the season. Simon Edvinsson filled that role in the top 4 that Jake Wallman, vacated. Obviously, Ben Sherratt bumped up to the top pair, which left that spot open on the second pair, and we saw that second pair be better with Simon Edvinsson on it, with Jeff Petrie, rather than when Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie were together. So I think Simon Edvinsson is going to come in terms of expectation. Like, I think he's going to be your second pair defenseman on the left side with, unfortunately, but at the same time, out of necessity, Jeff Petrie. And last year he had 30 points in 54 games with the Grand Rapids Griffins. He only registered 2 points in 16 games with the Detroit Red Wings, but that's okay. Simon Edvinsson, I'm not expecting him to provide a ton of offense, right? He does have a decent offensive output, but that's not the part of his game that I want to see the most growth out of. I want to see him be unbeatable in his own end. That's what I want to see first. I want to see him to be able to push that puck up the ice in transition. The offense can come later at the NHL level, but what this team needs right now more than anything is defense. Good defense out of their defensemen, and I think he's going to provide that. Now, when you're talking about ceiling of role, the dream is, of course, Moritz Seider. 100% agree with you. I think all of us, as Red Wings fans, in unison, get excited about the idea of 6'6" Simon Edvinsson next to 6'6" or 6'4" Moritz Seider on the blue line as this team's top pair. And just like what you said, I'm in lockstep that it's just out of necessity right now that you can't afford to have Simon Edvinsson on the top pair, because if you have Edvinsson and Seider on the top pair, that means Sherratt and Petrie are likely back together, and we saw last year that pair does not work well together. And on the same note, I don't know if it's wise to put Simon Edvinsson in his first functionally rookie season. I know he's not technically a rookie by Calder Trophy standards anymore because he's played too many games in 2 seasons combined, but he's functionally still a rookie. I don't think it's wise to put Edvinsson with Seider right now, given what the type of deployments that Seider is getting. But if you turn that on its head, I think by putting Edvinsson on the second pair, that will allow, not a lot, right? We use that word marginally a lot this offseason, Scotty, right? I think it will allow for Seider and whoever is his top pair line mate, likely to be Ben Sherratt or whomever it might be, but we're projecting Sherratt to have slightly less difficult deployments because we believe that Edvinsson will be able to take on harder deployments with Jeff Petrie than Sherratt and Petrie could, because we saw that chemistry worked well together. And Simon Edvinsson actually had tougher deployments in small sample size, 16 games played, than his partner Jeff Petrie did across his, I think it was 77 games played or something along those lines. Of course, again, sample size, it says a lot there, but I think that it's better served in the short term to have those two on separate pairs, but long term, you want them together. And to your point about special teams, I think absolutely he's going to get special team times. In fact, if you go to Natural Stat Trick and you filter it by penalty kill, he was 5th in penalty kill time per game at 1 minute and 12 seconds per game played. And now that Jake Wallman is gone, I fully expect him to then be the second pair penalty killer, like without a shadow of a doubt. I think because we know they like to keep the pairs together. If it's Ben Sherratt and Moritz Seider, that's your top penalty kill. That means it's going to be Petrie and Edvinsson as your second penalty kill. I think that is pretty much, set in stone. Set in stone is kind of a bolt, but I think that that's a pretty good guess that's what it's going to be. Power play, I don't expect this year, but in the near future. But I think Simon Edvinsson's going to play a huge role, and I think he kind of has to if this team wants to take a step forward, and it needs to.
Yeah, I think to your point, he should not be even remotely in consideration for top pair at the beginning of the season. I completely agree with that, and I think really the perspective we can have is if at any point in the season the fan base is really clamoring for him to be at the top pair at some point, then he is clearly playing well and doing something very right. And even if we don't think that it is likely to happen or even really should happen, given how the blue line looks right now, it would be a great sign if he was playing well enough to deserve that moniker.
Yeah, I think It's just a disservice to Simon Edvinsson to expect him to be able to handle the deployments that Moritz Seider is taking right now. But at the same time, him on the second pair is capable of taking on harder deployments than what the second pair was doing last year. At least we should expect him to be able to, which will make Seider's life easier. So it's kind of a win-win by having him on the second pair. You get to see a better second pair, and you get to see a better, easier deployments for Seider, giving him an opportunity to maybe show off a little bit more of that offensive upside we think he has. That being said, I think we kind of nailed it. We've talked Simon Edvinsson so much that we've kind of honed in on the things to focus on with him in his first full season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about JT Compher, 1-800-GOALS now, as we know and love him as. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's move on and talk about JT Compher. Now, this is a guy who kind of quietly had a nice season as the second-line center for the Detroit Red Wings. He put up 48 points in 77 games played, 19 goals, which was a career high, and 29 assists. That point total of 48 is second only to his career high, which he set the year prior with the Colorado Avalanche of 52. He is going into his second year of his 5-year contract that's paying him $5.1 million, and he is only, I believe, I have it up in front of me, but I want to double check before I say it wrong, 29 years old. And so he's on the correct side of 30, not that like you turn 30 years old and all of a sudden you suck, but it's still the correct side of 30. It means he's on the younger side still.
You're on the objectively right side.
Objectively the correct side of 30. So
you're over than 30, you're wrong. According to Brian. Not me. Those are Brian's words, not mine.
That actually goes more for our listeners than for the athletes.
Of course,
I'm kidding.
Brian's really doing well. Brian's really doing well today.
I'm kidding. Scotty, JT Compher, I mean, he had a pretty productive first year at the Detroit Red Wings. What do we expect of him in year 2?
Yeah, I really liked what I saw from Compher in year 1 with the Wings. I know that there were some questions about the contract that was given to him and about his role on the team and whatnot. I'm pretty pleased with what we saw in year 1, and when looking ahead to what to expect this year. Honestly, we'll see. There's definitely going to be some line, blender stuff happening, but early on, I kind of expect him to just be the solid middleman in between Vlad and Kane, which is a fascinating role for him. He's not a high-end goal scorer, but certainly can distribute the puck decently well, and they trust him on the defensive side of the puck and certainly in our own zone, but they're not going to put that line out there in our own zone if it is truly him and then Kane and Vlad. So I don't know. I'm really maybe above anybody else. I'm really fascinated in how he's utilized this season. We saw him get some special teams opportunities. I would imagine that will carry over into this year as well. But yeah, a solid two-way guy that can distribute the puck. And if he's surrounded by, incredible veteran offensive production like we anticipate him to be, then there's really nothing in my mind that says he can't put together a pretty darn good season. Yeah, I mean, this is a second line center who I think it produced well at the cap hit that he was given, just a shy over $5 million.
just about 50 points. That's pretty much exactly what you signed him to replicate, and he did that. Fantastic two-way center who can play both offensive and defensive zone deployments very well. And he played off power play and penalty kill time, right? Like he had the 6th most power play time on the team, and that goes for everyone. 7th most, and he averaged 2 minutes and 30 seconds of power play time a game. And then on the penalty kill, he was 2nd most on the team at 2 minutes and 27 seconds per game. So this is a guy who you can use in all situations. He's kind of a utility player, and on a Stanley Cup contender, probably a 3C. But on this team, he is currently the 2C, and he's been producing well in that role. Like I quite literally don't have really anything bad to say about JT Compher other than like I just wish he could be a little bit more creative with the puck. But like when he's giving you everything that he is giving you in the you're asking so much out of him in terms of role, don't have much to complain about other than like asking this player to replicate that kind of production. I mean, I think the only type of conversation we can have about whether or not his role of second-line center is in danger is if maybe one of these young players who they drafted as a center could, because like Marco Kasper or Nate Danielson, they're not going to have play in the NHL unless they're ready for a top 6 role, and there's not even a guarantee that those guys play center when they do break it in, because there's a lot of times where you draft a guy at a center role, and they make it into the NHL, and at first you have them play on the wing to adjust to the NHL speed and style before translating them back to center. Dylan Larkin did that. Tim Stutzla did that with the Ottawa Senators. So I wonder, is there any threat to him as 2C in your eyes, or do you think he's kind of just locked into that position?
Not this year. I don't. We can talk about the future and talk about, ideally, I mean, best case scenario for this team is what you just said, is Danielson or Kasper hit in a center role and they are really solid 2Cs, and then Compher can play 3C, and then Kopp can play 4C. That's like easily best case snenario of this hypothetical. But in terms of the 2024-2025 season, no, it's JT Compher, and I have zero issues with that. I have zero issues with JT Compher being that guy. I'm really interested to see if they just surround him with a ton of offense and they just go, you're the man in the middle, get the puck outside and try to get some assists that way, or if maybe they I don't know, they're a little more creative with it and try some different things as again in terms of who's around Compher. But I expect a pretty similar year to last year. Maybe again, if he is with Kane and Vlad, maybe you see an uptick in assists. But if he plays, solid two-way guy that we don't have very many complaints about at the end of the year this year, then he's probably had another pretty darn good season.
Right. I mean, the only thing that I could ask out of JT Compher this year is be better at 5-on-5. And that's just because his expected goals for percentage relative was negative 2.57, which is one of the worst on the team amongst forwards. Same thing with his Corsi for percentage relative being a negative 3.45. Those aren't good numbers. And I do wonder, how much of that is just you're paired up with Patrick Kane and David Perron a lot of the times, and those are slower guys. But now you're going to be playing with Vladimir Tarasenko, and Patrick Kane's still a good possession number guy, and now you're going to be playing a full preseason and training camp with those guys, and with now Tarasenko on your wing, how much will that role change? So I'm wondering now with the pure possession ability of that line, if those numbers at 5-on-5 will improve. I don't know how JT Compher can get those possession numbers to go in the right direction, because the offensive output was very good. He's played on the power play and he's played on the penalty kill very well. It's just that 5-on-5, and I think a lot of that has to do with the team just in general being very poor at puck possession. His advanced analytics suffered, but that's on coaching staff to figure out how to get that line to be a better possession line going forward. But at the same time, it's hard to complain when the player is putting up good numbers, just pure stats-wise, goals, assists numbers, second highest of his career. I'm pretty pleased with JT Compher, except for that one area. So that's really the only complaint that I've had and could have. So that's the
Right.
only area for improvement I have for him is that those 5-on-5 possession numbers.
Right. And again, you would hope that if he's surrounded by as much offensive talent as we think, that those would get better.
Yeah, and again, like that's a team-wide problem that we were talking about. That's not
Correct.
exclusive to JT Compher. The possession numbers for this team in general were abysmal. So there's only a handful of players that were in the positive on this season. So, yeah, I mean, let's go to segment 3, and we can talk about Cam Talbot, somebody else who we've documented very intensively here since he's been signed to the Detroit Red Wings. So stay tuned for segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed, you do.
Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, the last person we got to talk about today is newcomer in net, Cam Talbot, somebody we have talked about pretty extensively since he signed his 2-year, $2.5 million contract with the Detroit Red Wings. He is 37 years old, Scotty, and that immediately is kind of a red flag, something, again, we've talked about. But despite the fact that he just turned 37 this offseason, he had an incredible year with the LA Kings, in which he played 54 games as the team's primary netminder and had a save percentage of .913. The question I have for you, Scotty, for an organization that is still looking for its goalie going forward, how big of a solution is or can Cam Talbot be?
Well, first off, you just continue with being 37 is a huge red flag. I mean, anybody over 30,
okay.
You just hate, man.
Well, hold on, time out. The 29 and 30 thing, that's a joke, but being 37 in the NHL, a lot of players, we saw it with James Reimer last year, who was 35. A lot of players are on their decline at that point.
No, man. You just don't like anyone older than you. That's too bad.
You're younger than me, so why do you care?
Because I just think you should love everybody. I think
Mr. Virtue Signal over here. Let's go. Come on.
No, I think Talbot. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Like this is a goalie room that is very. It's a big question mark. Like the entire goalie room is a huge question mark. You have Talbot, who, as you said, who knows how many really good years he has left in the NHL. Then you have Husso, who has been nothing but an inconsistent question mark so far as a Red Wing. And then you have Lyon, who was, had to play Superman last year, but like at the end of the day is 30 and has been in the AHL for most of his career. And who knows, right? Like, who knows? I think Talbot, you and I had no issue with the addition of Cam Talbot. It's just a matter of what to expect, and I'm not sure that's like possible to predict. Like, we could come on here in around the new year and be talking about how Talbot was a great addition, and he's got a 905 or even like a 903, and we're like, oh, look, he's not losing us any games, he's been solid, whatever. Or we could be talking about at the same time about how he should, like, we should count our losses and just completely go with the other two goalies, and neither would surprise me. And I think both are nearly just as likely. We've talked about it a lot, but like he had a great year last year behind a much better defense than what he's going to play in front or behind rather this year in Detroit. It's a huge question. I think it's worth the risk. It's a 1-year deal. Who cares? Like, yeah, it's absolutely worth the what?
2-year deal.
Oh, okay. Same sentiment, really. But like, sure, 2-year deal, worth the risk for the price tag you gave him too. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. Like I think it's really, really hard to say with confidence that he's going to do like anything really specifically again with confidence. I think it's very difficult to come on here and be like, oh yeah, like we found our goalie for the next 2 years. And I think it's just as difficult to be like, this dude's gonna absolutely suck. Like who knows? But the reason that they brought him in was because he was a cheap option, as you just pointed out, on a 2-year deal. And so can give you a little bit of depth. They had nobody under contract beyond this season in goalie going into the offseason. Now they have at least somebody, assuming he works out, that they can have under contract as a goalie next year. But they are going to play the depth game. They are going to say, you know what, one of these ought to stick. Like that's pretty much the mindset is like, it's been shaky for a couple of years now, or actually way beyond a couple of years. Goalie's been shaky in Detroit for a while. One of these is bound to work out. So let's just see what sticks.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not make more of it than it is, right? Like he's a Band-Aid goalie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Steve Yzerman said he was done giving out 2-year deals. He was looking for a long-term goalie, and then he immediately went out and gave a 2-year deal out to a aging goaltender. But if you want reasons to be, optimistic, is Cam Talbot is a goalie who historically, outside of a couple of rough seasons, has been very good throughout his NHL career. In his first 2 years in the NHL with the New York Rangers, he posted a .941 and a .926 save percentage, followed by with the Edmonton Oilers of a .917, .919, and .908. And then after that is when he kind of went into his like a little bit of a rough stretch, 8-8-1 in 4 games with the Flyers, and 31 games in 18-19. He got traded from the Oilers to the Flyers of 8-8-1 and 8-9-3. And then right back, he bounced back to 9-19, 9-15, 9-11 with the Calgary Flames and the Minnesota Wild before one more bad year with the Ottawa Senators. But what goalie doesn't have a bad year on the Ottawa Senators defense at this point? Every single goalie, they're much like us, where every single goalie situation that they try to figure out, it ends up not being any good. And then again, this last year, 9-13 with the LA Kings. So if you look at his track record, he has a much bigger track record of success in net than struggles. But again, when you look at his age 36 season with the LA Kings, they faced the 4th fewest shots against at 5-on-5 in the NHL. So he was a little bit sheltered, and that's, a reason for concern, a little bit of a red flag, as I put it again, along with his age. And at that point in your career, most players, not every player, not Hall of Famers like Ovi and Kane, they begin to regress. And so can he kind of resist the James Reimer curse, right? Where, you're good, solid throughout most of your career, and then just you start to decline. Although Reimer did technically have a bounce-back year with the Detroit Red Wings, crazy enough, after a subpar year with the San Jose Sharks, but the Detroit Red Wings were a better team than the Sharks. It's just, can Cam Talbot be the solution in that for 2 years until Sebastian Cossa is ready to make that leap? I want to come in on here and say that Cam Talbot will be better than Ville Husso and Alex Lyon because the numbers say he should be. But at the same time, I said this very same thing about Ville Husso coming from St. Louis. He was another goalie who was sheltered, but put up very good numbers in St. Louis's system in the regular season. I said the same thing about Alex Nedeljkovic prior to that. He was a very good goaltender in a sheltered system. So while I look at all these numbers and all these analytics and everything points to he should be the Band-Aid that gives us at 1A caliber goaltending for the next 2 years, I've been burned twice before already in this constant search for a new goalie since Jimmy Howard retired, that I know better. So what my prediction is I think he will be a capable goalie, and I think he will carry the workload for the most part for the next 2 years, but he's not anything more than just a Band-Aid.
Yeah, I also think that if he is a 1A this year and a 1B next year, that's still a huge win. Like, I
Yes.
don't think he needs to be the, like, 1A, whatever, 55 to 60 game starter for 2 years in a row for this to be like a good addition and a successful signing. I think if he can take a heavy weight of the responsibility this season and then even take a back seat next year if they find somebody else or if Coase is ready, then that's still a win.
Yes, I completely agree. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow because we skipped Monday's episode. So you'll get back-to-back episodes, Tuesday and Wednesday. And then after that, it'll be a Friday episode as we finish up our player previews this week. And then we'll have to be more creative with our content for the remainder of August. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.